Hey everybody, Jonathan here from Lehigh Valley Music and Sound. And with me tonight is Matt Carlos from Bethlehem, PA. He's an EDM producer.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for being here. So Matt got a hold of me and was telling me about his EDM music. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, I'm not really an expert at a lot of this. And EDM, I wasn't really sure of. I told him that I came across an EDM channel on YouTube once, and I wasn't really sure exactly what it was. I thought it was kind of like a techno thing, and then, so when Matt was telling me about EDM, I said, so what is that? Is that techno? And it's funny because I'll let you tell the story, but that's a question you get asked a lot.
Yeah. I think there's a considerable amount of confusion when it comes to electronic music, where EDM and techno are kind of like interchangeable words that people use as like a broad term. So, you know, in the example that I used with you, you could say Nickelback is a rock band and Slipknot is also a rock band. They fall under this envelope, but they have drastic, you know, differences. And I think...
You think so?
Well, so I think with techno, you had it's like DDR music. Sandstorm is a very good example of techno music, and
well, you were telling me earlier before the show that techno, what the heck? That techno has usually that very specific upbeat.
Yeah, it's usually pretty fast-paced.
Is it always like that? 'Cause
almost every techno song I've listened to, and I still do listen to some techno artists, they usually have like a higher tempo.
Yeah.
And it's usually your boots and cats and boots and cats and boots and cats and boots, cats, boots, cats.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I think a lot more things sound more computer generated. Like you kind of ride on the glitches and a lot of like computery sounds, where I think EDM kind of falls more along the lines of danceable music and music that also you wouldn't consider to be electronic. EDM involves a lot of live musicians and a lot of even software created music.
And I know what you mean, because I know in the one song that you shared with me that is up on the page right now is the Dream Sequence. I'm going to bring that up because Dream Sequence has an organic feel to it, an organic sound to it. Like if you didn't know any better, you might think that it was actually produced by physical instruments.
Yeah, I for sure feel that, and I know that a lot of that song was actually self-produced. There are some samples that I've used in that, but a lot of the drum tracks are something that I had just made individually, tediously, along a timeline. That song was more of a learning experience. We're trying to arrange drums, and I actually got away from making live drum samples to something that was more digital. I've moved more away from real drums to like Follies and more like stranger impact sounds and things that you wouldn't traditionally use as percussion, I guess. So Dream Sequence is a fun song. I love that break in it.
I like the music in general because, you know, thanks to Matt here clarifying the differences between technical why don't I want to keep calling it that.
Maybe I'll call it technical.
I'm so glad he clarified the difference, and it all makes sense because, you know, like with Matt's music, and I've been grooving to it. I literally just put it on earlier to listen to it, and I was just kind of like losing myself in my thoughts. And I looked down and I was like, oh, I almost listened to this entire 11-minute montage of Matt's album. And I was like, oh wow, and it's like it's grooving type music, like we were like Matt was telling me right before the interview, like it's the type of music that you could put on and just relax to, or put on while you're cleaning up the house or something, and it's great. Like it's very atmospheric.
Yeah, I a couple months ago I came across a YouTube channel called Lo-Fi Study Beats, and I started off making lo-fi music because I felt that it was the easiest way to enter music. It'd be like, oh, okay, I'll just make lo-fi music, and if I don't produce it well, it's all right. Through that lo-fi study beats, I kind of realized, it'd be like, no, you still need to be able to produce pretty well to produce this music because you're achieving this lo-fi sound. But I think that, my music is not something that is good for a foreground. It's more of, you're at a party, and people are playing beer pong and there's music going on in the background, or you're doing something else actively. For me, I like putting on headphones and just walking through the woods, and for me I get the atmospheric and relaxing. Surprising has been a word that people have used, which I guess some songs I would consider relaxing, but I guess the intentions don't always fall. Music is a very personal experience, so I think that some of my songs can be very atmospheric, and I have aimed for that, but a lot of the songs that people have told me, they'd be like, wow, this is really relaxing. Like, wow, I wasn't really going for that at all. They'd be like, but rad.
It depends on the tune, because some of the more lower key songs are actually very relaxing. I could almost see myself vegging to, and I actually was vegging earlier while listening to their music. And then some of the more upbeat songs, that's more you want to move to it. So
Yeah.
It really just depends on the song.
Yeah.
But now I want to talk about how long you've been doing this, because I found this very fascinating, because you haven't been doing it very long, have you?
No, it was last February. I had moved into an apartment alone, and it was just me, the little amount that I owned, and a cat. And I had been swimming around the idea of buying a MacBook. I was like, but it's a lot of money. I don't know if I'm going to use it. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to buy the MacBook. I'll work out of GarageBand, and I'll see what I can get out of it, because I had found the difficulty I had with making music is I would make something, I would have nowhere to log it. I would just videotape myself playing guitar, and then it would sit somewhere, and I'd go back months later and be like, oh my god, I completely forgot about this. So having it in one space was great. A year ago I bought a MacBook and started working out of GarageBand just with preloaded GarageBand sounds and samples, and started composing things. And then I started to just get samples from things like Cymatics and a handful of pretty popular Black Octopus Sound and Soundshock and things like that, which are pretty recognizable, I guess, in the industry, a pretty big following. And then I had decided that after a host of songs, I probably made maybe 20 songs in GarageBand, pulling samples, and I was like, all right, I need to get something more powerful, because I feel like I do not have enough manipulation of the things that I want to do. So I bought Ableton, and then that's when I kind of really started being serious about making music. I watched a couple videos, and I was like, wow, there are so many things that you can do in this program. I think I'm going to start off with, doing this. Actually, I lied. Before GarageBand, I was producing chiptune music on my Samsung S7 through Caustic, which is an audio work sequencer and it just came so cumbersome to be working on this little screen.
Oh, I can imagine.
And I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for a full scale production. And
they have video editing software for phones, and it's just it's amazing. It really is amazing what they've come up with as far as the software apps, as they call it on phones. It's the apps are amazing, but it's just not practical. I'm sorry, but no matter where we are in technology, no matter how advanced things get, I always want a desktop for work, for production. I have a desktop at my house, and I use that for my video editing, for my audio editing, and I guess if I was in a pinch and I was out somewhere and I desperately needed to edit a video, I would do it on the phone, but it would not be a very pleasurable experience, because there you are with this little device, and you're like trying to manipulate things with your thumb, and it's just...
It's pretty impractical.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple months ago, my girlfriend bought me a computer monitor.
Nice.
She knew that I wanted a monitor. I was so pissed because she didn't ask me. She just bought it as a surprise, and it just showed up at my house. And I was like, why would you? And then I plugged it in, and I was like, oh my God, I put my foot in my mouth. This is amazing. I have a whole nother screen to work off of. Which is difficult because once you're starting to do tedious things, you have to switch between screens. And now to have an extended desktop, it makes your workflow easier. And most of my time up until now has been more focused on my workflow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, people will get writer's block, and that can happen a lot until you develop enough points that you have like jumping off points. You'd be like, okay, well, I know I'm going to start with a melody, and I can build off this melody. It has come far enough in my music making experience that it's gotten to a point where I have like several of these hopping off points where I can go from just a drum rhythm, or I can go from just vocals, or I can go for a melody or a harmony and be able to create something out of it. A lot of times I start making something and then it sits, and I'll go on to doing something else, and then I'll click on it another day and be like, oh wow. And be like, I've gotten enough more knowledge that I'm going to tweak this way, and that's how a lot of my songs come about. They're just pieces of a puzzle until I come to an impasse, and I'm like, I can't get past this. I'm just going to set this aside and move to something else. So now I feel like is the actual production end of it, instead of just kind of figuring out and be like, all right, how do I do these things?
Mm-hmm. And how but so you've been doing this for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And you've been a musician for a very long time, though. You were telling me that you were in bands for years.
Yeah. I started off, when I got my first guitar when I was 13. I'm 30 now. I'll be 31 in next month. It was in my dad's closet, and I remember pulling it out and sitting on my parents' toilet playing it because they kept it in his closet. From there, I had a couple friends in school that we wanted to start like a band and start covering like AC/DC songs and like the Ramones, and be like, great, let's all learn our instruments together. So we started a band called Through Traffic. And it was a really fun experience because it was all like learning songs and, songs that we like and enjoy, and hanging out with your friends and being like teenage goofballs. And then I had gotten more serious about, making music. I bought a bass, and I started playing bass for a band called Lest We Forget. And then I ended up being the lead singer for it and screaming for it. And we played a decent amount of shows. I went on to join another band called Lehigh and started to just involve myself more in the metal scene until it kind of got to a point where you have this awesome ability when you're like 16 to like 22, 23, where you're like, I can do anything because like I don't have any responsibilities. I can just practice. I can do whatever I want. You don't have to worry about, a lot of the necessities of life.
Right.
Not necessarily you're being irresponsible. It's just easier to make things work.
Sure.
Until I got to about 23 and things started to fall apart because people started to develop their lives, and it's very hard to convince people and be like, hey, do you want to like quit your really good job to like play music in this band?
People get pulled into the rat race of life.
Yeah. And then I kind of like gradually switched out of the metal, where I still listen to metal, but I had enough experience with dealing with the music industry and being bottom of the bill opener and, not getting paid and traveling places to play in front of 4 or 5 people, which are all, it's not bad experiences. It just teaches you more. So I think once I had got introduced to it, it was just like, all right, I'm going to do things a little bit more my way this time. And I guess I will produce music that, I enjoy, and hopefully other people can enjoy, and then I can be able to get out there and play these things in venues where, people want to listen to it. I found that when you, in the metal band, relying on certain promoters and certain things only gets you so much exposure, and a lot of the shows won't necessarily fit your bill. And making the music that I make now, I think it's like even a step beyond metal, where it's just like, wow, this is, how do I go about finding, the people that enjoy this music that I produce? and in the span of 2 years, I have gotten here. So I think that it's gone fairly well for only 2 years.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have you here, and I'm sure there's a group of people out there that are happy to see you here too. I really enjoyed your music. It's one of the, and I encourage anybody out there that listen to Matt's music, replay it again, because it's kind of like I'm gonna kind of equate it to the Killers. When I listened to their second album, I didn't like it. It was because when I bought the Killers' first album, I loved it, and when I got their second studio album, I expected it to sound like the first album.
Yeah.
And it sounded nothing like the first album. And it wasn't until like the third or fourth listen that I started to get into it, and then I loved it. So like sometimes when you listen to something that you're not used to, it's your brain is not really sure what's going on. It doesn't know if it likes it or not. Give it another listen and kind of like, let it groove you, because it will. It's very moody music.
Yeah. I think that's why I led away from metal. Is I felt that, and not that metal's a bad type of music. I just felt that a lot of the metal that we were playing was all just this super heavy, like, we're so brutal.
Wow, that's pretty good vocals.
And I enjoyed that aspect, but once I had seen a couple DJs, and in a live setting, it's just like there's a whole range of expression that you have. It's very hard in certain types of music to achieve certain emotions.
And it kind of has, like, going with the whole DJ thing that you said, it's kind of like a Life of a Party feel.
Yeah.
It's a more fun feel, I think.
Yeah, there are some songs I feel that I develop where we're like, all right, I want these to be like the feel good, like, like classic hip hop, like Sunshine, Driving a Summer Car, But there are some songs that I have in production now that I wanted to more focus on, like this down tempo, like sad, almost depressing, to have a host of. EDM is like arranged where you have a way to navigate from something that can be very gentle to something that can be very heavy and emotional.
Yeah. And
it can be hard to achieve those sounds through other means, I feel like there's very few metal bands, professional metal bands that I know about that achieve this, softness without having the image of being soft. Like Metallica. Metallica's just like, oh, they're heavy, but then they kind of like lost their edge and became kind of more like hippies.
I liked them after they got sold out. So.
Yeah, I still enjoyed the music, but...
You want to know my first Metallica album? It was Reloaded.
Yeah. Oh.
And it's funny because I bought that CD when I was 15, and then, this is back when chatting was a thing. I don't know if people go on chat rooms anymore.
No,
I never going online and chatting with people about Metallica, and they were like, "Oh, anything past the Black Album sucks." And I was like, well, I think it's good. I mean, how can you not like Fuel?
Yeah. Reloaded is the album that has the flames on the front?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Wait, that's the only album that has flames on the front?
It's the black one. My older brother had... I have an older brother. I have 2 older brothers, but I had a lot of hand-me-down CDs from him, and I got that album. There was a Dishwalla album, the 311, a 311 album, and Follow the Leader by Korn, and that was kind of what stapled my interest in metal. I got introduced to that, and then I played soccer with a dude named George Polaris, and he showed me Slipknot, and I was just like, Slipknot's Iowa, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do, and I just navigated to find the most, like aggressive, brutal, and literal satanic music as possible. So it led me to like as far as I could go, until I was listening to grindcore, and I was like, all right, I think it's time to back away from this.
Now, this is something I wanted to bring up because you are interested in collaborating with other artists.
Yeah. I had met a saxophone player who's on two of my tracks. One's called Older and the other's called Somehow You. And he was an alto sax player. And when I met him, it was just like, great, let's do some tracking. We'll go to this tunnel and we'll just do a quick, you can just fool around and play some things. I'll give you a headphone to something that I have produced and we'll produce it off of that. And that was how one of my songs got produced. After that, I had just sat him down and just said, just play sax. Just do whatever you want. Do what you feel comfortable with. Play the sax the way you play sax. And I had this 15-20 minute tracking of just saxophone. And then basically I took those things and figured out which keys they were in and produced music, and then did it backwards where I chopped his saxophone and bumped it in. And I have been trying to find more and more people and be like, oh, well, this is kind of a good opportunity. The things that I fall short in, like singing, or I'm very self-conscious about my singing voice, so I have like a rap song set aside. And like Sam, like, I don't think I'm going to release those though. But to have somebody who, it's nicer to have a live instrumentation. And a lot of the DJs that I really enjoy have live instrumentation, sometimes even full orchestras. Wow. So to have somebody, instead of me sitting in front of a computer and being like, all right, I need to like figure out a way to write this violin melody and a good violin sound, it'd be nice just to have someone that plays violin, or even for someone to come up and be like, hey, I have this idea and I'm wondering if you want to produce something for it. And I'd be like, that sounds great. I mean, I really want to collaborate with more people, because it puts you outside of your own creational box.
Yeah.
And given a goal and a target to aim towards, where someone was like, hey, I want this, it's just like, great, now I can work towards this and, have more of an outside opinion instead of me only giving the directions to my songs,
Yeah, and that's why I wanted you on this show. That's one of the reasons why I wanted you on this show, because I wanted you to tell the world, tell the Lehigh Valley, that you are looking for artists to collaborate with, that you want to work on projects.
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah. To not have to work and to choose your own work, it is exciting.
So to people out there that don't know exactly what EDM is, so it's... And there's a lot of misunderstanding with it, because, so people that don't really know much about it, they might think to themselves, okay, this is computer-generated music, and then they might think that, like, maybe this is easy or whatever. But I know for a fact that it's not easy. So the fact that you elevated to this height with only 2 years is amazing, and I can tell you must have like had your face in the software like every day from like sun up to sundown. I look coming from a video production background, like I know how much time it took for me to learn the software, because people tend to think that don't know anything about it. They tend to think that, okay, you have software, it's easy, you just go in there and do your thing, and but no, it's I don't even remember the name of the software anymore, but I tinkered around with a music generating type software a long time ago. I'm sure it was a freeware or free trial to purchase, and I gave up because it was like it is not easy. Like, one, you do have to be a musician or have a musical background of some sort, because you have to have a comprehension of music. And two, you have to have the knack or the ability to put together a melody that sounds worthy of listening to.
Yeah, no, it really is. It really is that case.
Timing out the beats, timing out everything. In music, everything is timing.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
It's I've had my girlfriend and my roommate and a handful of other people have been like, oh, what are you doing? And be like, oh, I'm producing music. And be like, all right, well, I'll come over and chill with you. And it'd be like, I really don't think you're going to enjoy sitting here, and they come over. And they're like, all right, let's do this. And it's just like, like over and over and over again. And me like tweaking little things. Be like, how do you think that sounds? And be like, I'm leaving. And I guess the hardest part, it's simple to arrange things. Even not being a musician, as long as you have, the right key and the right tempo. But I think once you start to try to incorporate certain things, it becomes increasingly difficult. The biggest thing for me is 808s. It took me so long to figure out how to have a punchy drum and have like a nice low end, until I figured out what sidechaining was. I was like, oh my God. Because once you layer a certain amount of things, they start to hog a sonic space. So it was having a variables of other members makes it easier for you to develop things. You start a band, well, you have your guitarist, you have your bassist, you have your drummer, you have your singer. You have each individual person who focuses on their each individual thing.
Right.
But then when you start producing, you start to realize more of the way, like, sounds work, and you have to be each one of those members. So listening things, you have to each thing individually, and then choose what your focal point will be. Be like, if you just arrange things, it's just a mush until you decide what you want your leading, whatever you want the person to focus. The things that fall into the background don't require as much as attention, because the people who are listening to my music are not me. It's not me just like picking it apart and being like, ooh, there's a weird note there. People are like just listening and vibing. And sometimes I hear certain songs and people are like, I love this song. And then I listen to it and I'm like, oh man, I'm doing it all wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's just the weird thing about music. It's not really, because, it's like with any type of art. And I'm going to go back to video production, because I've been producing videos now for a couple of years, and it's not always about what's important. Is not what you think is important.
Yeah.
Because when you get into all the art side of it, and you want to make things the best, and you want to make things quote unquote fancy, but that might not actually be appreciated by, or might not be received the way you expect it to be. What am I getting at? Well, what I'm basically saying is, like, when it comes to video production, it's always about the content, and then with music, it's what. And we had this conversation the one night. What makes you move? What makes someone move? That's when a song makes someone move involuntarily, whether they're tapping their feet to it, or whether they're just like kind of move, like rocking, like chair dancing, shit like that. That's when you succeeded, I think, is like, because it's an involuntary expression, and it can be the simplest tune. You think about like some of the biggest hits out there from over the years, not just recently, but from over the years. It's always like the basic songs.
Yeah, I had realized that when I started involving myself with playing jazz guitar. I was like, I want to be a jazz musician. But then I had realized that the only people that listen to jazz are typically jazz musicians or like music lovers. Jazz is not... There's a very small demographic of people that sit down to Miles Davis for the enjoyment. They'd be like, wow, this is really good. It's usually people that are musicians. Jazz is a musician's music.
I totally get what you're saying. That
complexity, if you're focusing on that complexity, it's hard to make catchy music.
Yes.
A lot of popular music has a good melody or a nice rhythm, and that's what they vibe on. If you try to overcomplicate things, which I did with a lot of my earlier music, it's just like, I want to throw all these ideas, and you'd be like... And then I kind of realized, you have the chance to make other songs, Matt. So let's just focus on this melody, and that's what Dream Sequence was.
Yes.
It's just, I had that one guitar part, and I was like, I want to take this melody, these 3 simple notes, and be able to compose a host of rhythms and accompaniment to it. And I think I did a fairly decent job on it.
I enjoyed it.
With the types of the styling of music.
I enjoyed it so much that I want Dream Sequence to have its own video on the page, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind
Sweet.
at all. Sweet.
Do people still say that?
I mean, I don't know.
So all that being said, though, it's okay not to care. Did that make any sense? What I mean is, like, if you don't, that was just a suggestion for being mainstream, for the business side of things. Like, if you want to sell 1 million records, then you want to keep it simple. Now, if you don't care about any of that, if you are all about the art, if you are all about the complexity, then be about it. That's fine.
Exactly.
I mean, do what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, if it depends what your goal is, what you're trying to do. If you're trying to be on hit radio, well then yeah, you gotta play radio friendly.
You're gonna
songs.
have to compromise.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly that. I open up my music program with an intention. I want to make something like this. Wherever that falls, that's the target. There are very few times where I have opened a song and be like, you know what? I'm going to make this, a mainstream song. Because for me, as I get the enjoyment out of making, I make the music that I want to hear. So not listening to a lot of mainstream music, I have to be like, okay, well, what's on the radio now? And be like, listen to these things and be like, all right, what are the elements of this song that I'm going to incorporate the song that I'm making now? And some of my songs have come out that certain way. So I feel like there's nothing wrong with being mainstream. There's nothing wrong with making mainstream music. There's nothing wrong with making any music.
And you can sneak in your more complex pieces. Like when you release an album, just like we were talking about, like a lot of bands, like they'll have like the radio friendly songs that make it to the radio, and then you get to their album and they're like, oh wow, this is different. Yeah. So like you lure them in, and then when they listen to the rest of the album, you might have like say 2 or 3 more creative tracks on there where you kind of show off the complexity of your skills and your art.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I feel like my music covers such a broad range of stylings that a lot of things I would not lead off with. I would leave them on an album, because if you're someone who is going to listen to that type of music, chances are you're going to listen to music, because that's the way I do it. I find a song and I'm like, wow, I really like this song. I'm going to go to this album. And then I start listening to the album and be like, is it all the same? And be like, oh no, it's got a lot of like weirder stuff on it. So I feel like you need to choose something that's more listenable to drag people in. We're not dragging, get over here. to have people go, And I think that certain songs have that availability. Little Dicky had some, like, he's a pretty popular rapper now, where, I'd hear him be like, there's like Mario sounds in this. And you're
Nice.
like, wow, that's really sweet. But I think that with other things, you either do something good, or you do something all right, or you do something bad, or you don't do anything at all. I mean, you have all the options. I don't think that necessarily all the music that I make will, be listened to by everybody, but I feel that there is some pieces in every song that I've made that something can be taken away and you're like, wow, that was pretty nice.
Yeah.
I think that the refining process is really where it comes, especially with collaboration, where you meet somebody and, they do a certain style and say, like, disco music, and be like, all right, well, I want to make something more disco. You're like, okay, well, let me do some research. Let me figure out some things, and we can do this. And just that fact alone of creating, I think being any type of creative mind, you always, deal with the pile of insecurities and, the struggle of being like, is this good enough? Is this good enough? Is this good enough? I don't know if it's good enough. You make something and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And you release it. And then a couple months later, you listen to it and you're like, oh, well, this wasn't as good as I thought it was. But I think when you operate like that, it forces growth.
Yeah.
It causes you to refine things, and
You have to start working on projects in order to grow.
yeah.
That's the best way to learn and evolve.
Yeah.
So we're going to close this interview out pretty soon, but I want to give you a chance to give your final thoughts, one last word. You have a message for everybody out there?
A message. I had not prepared a message.
Check out his page. Check out his music.
Well, if I had the best suggestion, go over to Spotify, go on iTunes, Deezer, Tidal.
And those links will be included in this post.
Included in the video. Thank you for the support.
We'll do that, definitely.
Yeah, Matt Carlos, Acrobatic Cat. I have some more stuff being released shortly, and I hope to. If you're any type of musician, someone who's starting, someone who's intermediate, someone who's advanced, please contact me. I would love to work with you. Let's make some music and try to create some type of a better music scene for the Lehigh Valley.
And Matt is a really great guy to work with. I've been communicating with him all week.
Yo, same, Jonathan, for real.
So, contact this guy, get a hold of him if you're a musician of any type, and you want to expand your horizons. Maybe you're a metal band or a rock band or a punk band, country band, and you just kind of want to mesh the worlds, maybe add a little electro love to your songs.
Yeah, some
you
nice
you like that electro
electric love?
You like that?
It's a little bit of Technica.
So yeah, let's collaborate. That
Cool.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Matt's a cool guy to work with.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, guys, I want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Artist Spotlight. Make sure you give Matt some love on his page, Spotify, Facebook page, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Righteous.
All right.
Sweet.